Welcome to the Inward Investing Podcast. I'm Mike Ritter, and today I have an amazing guest, Jeff Giosi out of Morgantown, West Virginia. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, buddy. Excited to be here.
I am too, and I'm excited to get straight to the conversation because we've had a number of really cool guests on the show. Number one, we've had a guy named Joel Jameson, who's a big authority on HRV and recovery. We've had some naturopathic doctors. We've had a naturopathic doctor who specializes in fathers because he lost his father when he was young. And we have a lot of really cool stories. And I think one of the most fascinating pieces to me, as far as conversations worth recording and putting out there for people to listen to, is people who have done something exceptional, but to hear the human story behind it, not necessarily just, hey, I eat well, I have abs, and I perform really good. I mean, that's really cool too, but there's something that people outside of the fitness industry don't know is that, there's a lot more to being healthy and happy than just getting a set of abs. And you have a specifically exceptional story. So I'm going to get out of your way here. And for the people that don't know you, I've talked to you briefly before this, but let's just give me a little background on, where you came from, who you are, and, we'll get to the good stuff a little later, but let's give us that brief background. Who are you and where you're from?
Like you said, my name is Jeff Giosi. I was born and raised Long Island, New York, which is where I spent 18 years of my life. My mom, I think, identified that I had ADHD really early on and tried to put me in as many sports as she possibly could to keep me active and probably wear me out a little bit. So I remember playing soccer when I was younger, played baseball, did everything. I love backstories, like how you even began to sit in that chair. Like so many decisions led up to that. So it was actually something when I was 9 years old that prompted this conversation right now. When I was 9 years old, my mom said I didn't want to play soccer anymore. I had a bad experience with a coach. And she said, Jeff, you have to do something. You get to pick. What is it going to be? And I have no idea why we picked this. I have no idea how it came about. It was track and field. And I remember I was so terrified to go to my first meet. I didn't want to get out of the car. I think my mom actually bribed me to get out of the car. And I maybe did 5 or 6 events that day and brought home some hardware. And for me, I instantly fell in love. And so I ran track and field through a church league all throughout middle school. In high school, being in New York, we had winter track, but I played football in the fall, winter track, and then baseball in the spring. Once again, it was a interesting coaching situation when I was in 10th grade. I had a baseball coach that it was a really tough year for me. And my junior year, I was undecided what I was going to do in the spring. I was either going to play baseball or I was going to run track. We won the county championships in track and field, and I am addicted to winning, like most of us are.
Yeah.
Our baseball team was 2-18 the year before. That wasn't fun. So I decided to run track, and that's actually what got me to West Virginia University to begin with.
That became a no-brainer after a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I came to WVU as a walk-on track and field athlete. And
walk-on, what was that experience like?
Yeah, well, I'm 5'6", and I really have no business running track at a D1 level. And I tell this to anyone, even now, even in the CrossFit world, we all have different skills. We all have different gifts. It's how you develop them. I'm not your prototypical 6'2", 195, 205 pound athlete. I have had to develop myself through grit, through hard work, through determination to even get on the level of those people who are naturally born there. We all have a cross to bear. We all have something to overcome. And so I made it as a walk-on just because I tried really hard. But that kind of lends itself into coaching too, because I knew that for myself, I had to be an absolute technician and proficient in everything that I did. I had to do it exactly right to even get on the level of the people that were just born that way. So it was tough. I'm actually going through the book right now, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And if some of you have read it, when he was going through Bud's training the third time, basically he had shin splints. There was fractures up his shin, and he duct taped them up. I never got to that point, but for me in track and field, I knew that I was always the underdog. I knew that I was David in the David and Goliath story. And so I just ran and ran and ran. And eventually I created stress fractures with both of my shins just because I tried to put out so much because I knew I was already at a deficit that I basically just ran myself into the ground. Overtraining is an interesting word. It was just my body couldn't take what I was trying to put it through. So speed up that timeline a little bit. I ran track and field. I became an all Big East decathlete at West Virginia University. Again, it wasn't – I believe we looked it up one time. I was the shortest decathlete in the country. The events that I did, there was the 110 hurdles. I believe their chest height on me. But it was one of my favorite events just because it was a sprint, but there was so much technique involved in the actual race itself. It was awesome. After that, I knew that the only reason I was able to even compete on that level was because of the strength conditioning program that I was in. My strength coach, I fell in love with him. He brought so much to my life mentally, spiritually, and obviously physically. And I fell in love with what he did, and I fell in love with what he did for me. And I knew that I never wanted to work at a desk. And really quickly, it was my sophomore year in college, I had a conversation with him. I said, how do I do what you do? And at the age of 19, I started interning at WVU for strength conditioning. I interned for 4 years. Then when I graduated, I was offered a grad assistant position, which I took. It was free grad school. Got through that program in a year, and I became an assistant strength coach at WVU. I worked primarily with men and women's basketball, but over the entire course of time here, I worked with all the teams, but my primary sports were men and women's basketball. After that, NCAA is tough because there's a lot of politics and bureaucracy. Our football coach left and went to Michigan. Strength staff kind of went to Michigan too. Some of us stayed back here. After that, I got out of the field of strength conditioning, and I was like, personal training is where it's at. I moved to North Carolina, decided that, nice weather, whatever, lived down there, started personal training. I realized that going from working with Division I athletes to general population in a non-CrossFit setting, because CrossFit wasn't really big in 2008 at that point. For me, it was really dry.
Let me ask you,
Yeah.
What's one thing the general public doesn't know about working with athletes? Because I know any kid getting into, training is like, hey, I want to work with elite athletes. I want to work in the big programs. What's one thing that you got out of that maybe the general public doesn't know? You don't coach a program. You coach the athlete. I think we see these athletes compete, whether it's the weekend for football or, every couple of days for basketball, whatever it is. These are 18 to 22-year-old kids. They have struggles in classes. They have boyfriend or girlfriends. They are getting in and out of relationships. Even though, we make it this big thing in the NCAA, it has all this money, and they're kids. I loved and value my time at WVU so much because the relationships that I created, and this was 2004 to 2008. I still receive text messages from one of the players that he's playing professionally over in Istanbul or Israel. He was texting me 2 or 3 nights ago. So they are kids, but it's the relationship that you form
with them. Brett Bartholomew has a book called Conscious Coaching, and he talks about the buy-in.
It's a great book. Yeah.
He talks about the buy-in, but not in like a squirmy, like we're trying to sell you something. Buy-in, basically, you talk about trust. And so having these 18 to 22-year-old kids from vast backgrounds trust you, and then once they trust you, they will run through a brick wall. They will do anything that you tell them to do, and the relationships are formed from that. It's not just training. It's not just training an athlete to do better in a sport. It's training a human being to be better at life.
Wow. And you're right. It's much bigger than the program, because I think that's the impression that you get, is that you're strictly focused on the outcome of the program. And, the best trainers are the ones that get the best measurable difference.
Sure.
And, it's a lot deeper than that. And it's interesting to hear, somebody who has the experience say that, it's a lot about the human being.
Mm-hmm. And what's so, for me, rewarding as a strength coach is, so I worked with these guys when they were, men and women when they were 18 to 22, where they were trying to figure out themselves. They were trying to figure out life. They were coming in as kids and leaving as young adults. It is ridiculous. So basketball teams in the NCAA have roughly 15 athletes on them. It is ridiculous how many athletes I worked with that are now coaches. And to watch them develop into the men and women that they are today, to me, at the end of seasons, when you say, oh, we've won this many games, that's completely arbitrary. To now look back and see the men and women that these kids turned into. That to me, that's the victory. Yeah,
that's pretty amazing. And let's describe the transition to personal training. So you go from doing something like that into the world of training adults with all kinds of different points of view, all different walks of life, all different reasons for training. What's going through your head as you transition into the public sector?
Yeah, it was a political, big business decision. I kind of wanted to get out of the NCAA because to me it was about the relationships with the athletes, and I saw it more as a big business over time. So I wanted to train people aside from that. I wanted to train people where it was pure, and I thought personal training was great. When I was a strength coach, I was working 80 to 110 hours a week. I think my longest stint was 111 days without a day off. And I was like, personal training, I'm going to make my own hours. This is going to be awesome. This is going to be everything I
live the dream.
Yeah. So it turns out you only work when people aren't working, which is early morning and late at night. They don't really care if it's a holiday because they have off, so they want to train.
Right.
And it was really tough just because at some level, even if they didn't like strength conditioning, at some level, collegiate athletes knew that it was a means to an end. They understood that it could make them better. In a personal training sector, most people were there, like digging back and like trying to get to their why, because their doctor told them that diet and exercise was important, and they weren't doing it for a greater purpose. They were doing it because someone told them to do it, and they think it's the right thing to do, or this is how you become healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear this stuff is good for me, so I'm going to do it.
Right.
That's kind of the general outlook.
And it, even though I talk about the relationship part and that trust part being a bigger piece, the athletes in college had a deadline. Like, they knew when the season started. They knew when they were going to peak. They knew when championships were. So there was always like, we're going to push till here. We're going to push till here. Where a lot of times in the general pop, it's the finish line essentially is death. and so you're just training for this wide, like, there's no timeline, and it's just, there's no it is. It's a lack of purpose. They feel that there's a lack of purpose, and in my opinion, it's going through the motions.
Yeah. And how did you, obviously you sound like the kind of guy who that would bother. And how did you start integrating that purpose into training? Were you able to at this point? Is that something that didn't come until later?
I will tell you that when I was younger, I was very naive, and I didn't realize the things I didn't know, because when I was a strength coach at WVU, my teams did very well. We were, Elite 8, Sweet 16. They were successful, and I misunderstood success for expertise. So because my teams won, I valued that as I was successful. That created a large gap in knowledge, because I wasn't a continual learner, because my teams were winning, and I thought that I had arrived. I thought that I had made it. My ego stood in the way a little bit. I mean, I was 26 years old. So when I went to personal training when I was, 28, it just frustrated me, and I didn't have an answer. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to tell you that I created something and I made this model, and it frustrated me to the point that I no longer became a personal trainer. I couldn't do it anymore, because I knew that strength conditioning was so much more to me, and I didn't know how to get to the clients better. I'm not saying that I did a horrible job. I was probably average, but I couldn't get to the clients, and it was this, I couldn't bridge the gap, and it was really frustrating for me. So I saw a movie. The movie's called Fireproof with Kirk Cameron. I grew up watching Kirk Cameron in Growing Pains. And in the movie, Kirk Cameron's a firefighter. And I was like, that is awesome. I'm going to be a fireman. I walked down to City Hall and said, hello, I'd like to become a fireman. And it turns out that they were running a hiring process. So I actually left the field of strength conditioning 100% and became a firefighter for 2 years.
Wow. So you left really in a blaze of glory. It was.
Yeah.
Wow.
I knew I didn't want to be in the NCAA working with college athletes out of college. Personal training was not right for me. And in 2008, that is all that I knew. Like, those are the options. You're a strength coach in college, or you're a personal trainer. There you go. And I began to think that the world of strength conditioning was not right for me. So I became a fireman, a paid fireman for 2 years. Yeah.
Wow. So for 2 years, you jumped straight into firefighting. Number one, I'm sure that wasn't everything you expected it to be. I'm sure there was some surprises there, but you stopped after 2 years. I'm leading into this story that's coming up that I don't even know how one thing led to another. So right. I think this is a good time that you definitely had some, from here on, your life became very, very interesting. So let's dive into some of that. How did that happen, getting into firefighting and then leading into
my ego ran my life. So when I was a firefighter, what was tough is you become a firefighter out of high school. Here I was, 30 years old, 31 years old, had a master's degree. I've worked with teams at elite levels, and I was a firefighter. It took about a year and a half of that, 2 years, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the brotherhood. I fell in love with the guys that I was working with. And what I missed in the first year and a half was I missed all the skills that I could have been developing for the future, because I was in my own head about what was next. Yeah. When what was next presented itself, I left, even though at that point I was fully in love with firefighting. I was one of the PT instructors for the academy, and I didn't realize that I was doing it, but I was doing CrossFit with them. I was having them do like functional fitness with their air packs and gear. And so I was kind of flirting with the strength and conditioning world again.
It sounds like the perfect marriage, standing right here. I mean, it does
awesome.
sound like the perfect marriage for you because you get that same brotherhood and relationships that firefighters are known for. Plus, a little bit of the adrenaline rush of the job, a little bit of, your skill set in there. Right now, in this stage, it feels like it's the perfect spot for you.
I was blind and I was unhappy, I think, with who I was. So firefighting honestly never stood a chance. I got a call from my former boss at WVU, who is now the director of strength and conditioning at Michigan. And the football coach that left WVU and went to Michigan was relieved of his duties. And so my former boss said, Jeff, and these were conversations that we had at WVU. Jeff, we've talked about opening an elite athlete training center. Now's the time. Do you want in? And I was doing a job that I never thought I would be doing. I was kind of lost in North Carolina. I said, absolutely. He said, be here in 2 weeks. So I left firefighting, drove up to Michigan. And we did. We opened an elite athlete training facility. It was everything that he said it was going to be. We trained Olympic and pro athletes. That job reintroduced me into the world of strength and conditioning. I worked with amazing human beings, relationships I still have this day. I held the Stanley Cup. I've had a silver medal around my neck. All these things were awesome. I made a lot of bad decisions when I went up there. I was so excited to get out of the situation I was in that I blamed on everyone else. It actually was my fault. But when I went to Michigan, I didn't secure housing. Everything that people do when they get a job, I didn't do. I just went like sight unseen, drove to Michigan, and I was like, I'm here. I had some temporary housing with the accountant of the gym. Then his mom got sick. She moved in. There was nowhere for me to be. And I didn't have the forethought to plan ahead. So when his mom moved in, well, Jeff didn't have a house. So, yeah, here it was December, January in Michigan. And I was essentially homeless. I had my truck.
Which is cold. That's a cold time of year.
Yeah, it wasn't warm. Yeah. And friends, if anyone says that they're self-made, they're an absolute liar and their ego is running their life. But I remember when I came back to Morgantown to visit my friends, and I told them, and it was embarrassing for me because they've supported me my whole entire life. And I remember telling them, I was like, guys, when I go back to Michigan, well, I'm going to be living in my truck. And I felt like I was letting them down. And my best friend, still my best friend to this day, has been my best friend since I was 18 years old. Him and his wife got me 3 nights in a hotel. So my first 3 nights of being homeless, I was able to spend in a hotel. I used $19 that I had to my name and bought a sleeping bag from Walmart. And then after those 3 nights, I spent 2 months sleeping in my truck while it was running so I could have heat in the parking lot of the training facility that I worked at.
Wow. So there's had to have been a moment where you're reflecting back.
There were a couple moments.
Yeah. I imagine time starts moving a little slowly. And,
yeah.
At this point, are you questioning your decision? Are you questioning whether or not this is where you should be?
Absolutely. And I think, in the email I sent you, I talked about circumstances aren't positive or neutral. Circumstances and situations, our attitude towards them makes them positive or negative. The actual situation is neutral. So being younger and not having self-accountability, self-awareness. It was everyone else's fault but mine. So in my reflection, I had anger towards other people. So I think that kind of slowed my process down of kind of figuring out for myself. But I wanted to get back into firefighting. I was like, hey, well, you know, at least one out of every 3 nights I'll have a bed to sleep in at the firehouse.
So you're about 3 months in and thinking about going back into firefighting.
It was about 2 weeks after I had moved to Michigan. I wanted to get back into firefighting. But I was wrestling with that because, again, here I was doing something at the highest level that I had education for. I was doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing, but I was actually in love with something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was really tough.
I know a lot of people that I think what we're talking about is kind of like a state of mind that a lot of people fall into where, what's it called? The sunk cost fallacy. I think that's the name for it, where because you've invested so much time and I have wanted this for so long, regardless of whether or not you're stuck in the mud, but you're still going to go through with this decision just because I paid for it for so long and this is what I thought that I wanted. And that can be really, really blinding, especially for somebody like yourself where, you know, I can tell, you know, that you've been motivated. And I know that there's a little bit of prestige that goes along with working with Olympic and pro athletes. And I'm sure you're not really too keen on letting that go either. Is that kind of playing into your decision? Like, are you willing to stick it out in your car just for the prestige of working with pro and Olympic athletes?
There was that part, no question. And here we are, you know, six years removed from that. My wife's family are huge WVU fans, and they think it was the coolest thing in the world that I worked with, you know, WVU athletes. And so no question, that played a role. And in my mind, the thing I was in love with, I was like, now I'm going to go back to firefighting. Like, no one cares about firefighters. Like, you get little sleep. You're running into you're working with pro athletes. So it was very challenging.
Isn't that funny how that messes with our psyche? Like, you know, firefighting seems less important than working with pro athletes. Yeah.
Yeah. Little twisted train of thought there.
Yeah.
And the relationship I had with my mentor, he was like a father figure to me. So it wasn't a boss-employee relationship. So coming to terms with this decision, I was going to have to tell a man that I loved, a man that poured hours and hours, hundreds of hours into my life, developing me as a strength coach and as a human being. And as an athlete, even before then, he was my strength coach at WVU. I was going to have to tell him that, thanks for the opportunity. This is great, but I'm done. I'll never forget that conversation. It was in his basement. I went over his house, and we spoke one-on-one. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had in my life. And walking away, I understood the decision, but I don't think I understood like the future implications of that decision. So I wasn't homeless the entire time I was in Michigan. After 2 months, one of our clients, not a pro athlete, just one of our general pop clients, had an RV that he was storing at a storage facility. He's like, Jeff, I'll bring it in and park it behind the gym, and you can live in my RV. Oh, it sounds funny even saying it. So I spent 5 months living in his RV behind the gym. So commute to work was great. It took me 10 seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
So technically, it's a big step up from your truck.
Oh, huge. I mean, it was spacious. I actually had a bed, way more comfortable for my dog. It was great. But still, something internal, something wasn't right. Something was missing. I went after the thing that I thought was going to make me the happiest, and I wasn't. It didn't. Tony Robbins talks about, you know, some of the most successful people are the least happy. You could be a billionaire but still be unhappy. Mm-hmm. And so there I was at the pinnacle of strength and conditioning. I was doing everything I wanted to do, and I was still unhappy. So my best friend, the one that gave me the 3 nights in the hotel, my best friend said, Jeff, why don't you come back to Morgantown? I have a rental house. You could stay there, figure things out. And when you get hired as a firefighter again somewhere, you'll leave Morgantown. I took him up on it. I moved back to Morgantown on his birthday, June 21st. And I lived in his rental property. Here's the second bout of homelessness. Then it rented.
Wow.
The theme is that I don't really plan ahead. So I didn't have a contingency clause for when it rented. What was I going to do? It rented, and I drove around for a night trying to figure out who I could hit up. I went to my buddy and I said, hey, can I hang out on your couch for a little bit? Here I am a grown man. I am, at this point, 34 years old, master's degree, begging my friend if I could sleep on his couch. He let me, and I spent a year and a half on his couch. So I guess I was 33 when that happened, yeah. And I spent a year and a half on his couch.
Wow.
And the 2 times of not having a home, not having a place to call my own, living in my truck, couch surfing, there are hardships and there are things that I went through, but honestly, they aren't things that I would take out of my story at all, because without them, those moments were such a time of growth in my life that it seemed like I was stalled. It seemed like I wasn't doing anything. But so much was happening and I was developing that I was just waiting for the right opportunity. I was waiting for something. But I also don't believe that you should wait and just sit around. I was trying to plan. I was trying to have a vision. I was trying to see what it is that I wanted to do, what was going to make me happy. I ended up being a busboy at a restaurant. This was just so I can get by as a busboy at a restaurant. I was an assistant GM at a bar, which is where I met my wife. I was a construction worker. Got a great tan, but other than that, it was terrible. And I was trying to figure it out. In the interim of all this, my best friend, the one that put me up in Michigan, let me stay in his house, opened up a CrossFit gym. And he's like, Jeff, do you want to coach there? And I thought CrossFit was the most ridiculous thing ever. I didn't know why someone wanted to do like 30 reps of a clean and jerk. So I said no. But what was great is that I now had a key to a gym. So I was homeless, but I could still work out. And it was about a year and a half into that my mom actually said, Jeff, would it be beneficial for you if you got your CrossFit level 1? Because at the time, my buddy mandated that all coaches had their CrossFit level 1. And with a chip on my shoulder, I said, I don't know, maybe, whatever. So my mom for Christmas that year bought me the $1,000 weekend course CrossFit level 1. And I went and I took it, and I went. Again, my ego was in front of me, and I went. I was like, these guys don't think like I'm going to go. I'm going to get a certification, and I'll be able to coach, like whatever. I still believe that I knew all this about strength conditioning. And I went, and within the first 10 minutes, I realized how little I knew. And the CrossFit level 1 class was kind of like the rebirth for me. It was like the coming to Jesus moment in my life. I started coaching at the gym after that. And it was shortly after that I had done this quest to become a firefighter again. 3 years, I drove around the country applying at different fire jobs and doing this. Nothing was working out. And I finally decided after 3 years of being in Morgantown that I wasn't going to chase that. God had me here for a reason. I love my friends. They are the most incredible group of human beings I've ever met. I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I was going to make Morgantown home. As soon as I told my best friend that, he said, Jeff, still living on my friend's couch, by the way. He said, Jeff, I want to sell CrossFit Morgantown, and I want you to buy it. And I was like, I'm still living on a couch and I have no money. He said, we'll figure it out. Is that something you're interested in? I said, absolutely not. No way. It was his wife 3 days later that convinced me. Everyone talks about tough love every now and again. And I think people that are really close to you, people that know you, understand, like, it's not being callous, it's not being mean. It's telling you what you need to hear. So my best friend's wife, love her. She makes my birthday cake every year still. She said, Jeff, what else are you doing right now? And that statement was just so profound. She was right. I wasn't doing anything. I was doing absolutely nothing with my life. And so I said, you know what? I will buy that gym from you. And so I signed paperwork July 1st, 2014. And I was still homeless.
So you may not be, this isn't necessarily a faith-based show, but, like I do myself, have a good faith base. And you reminded me of a story in the Bible about a guy named Joseph who.
So let me stop you there. At each moment that I was in a pit, sold into slavery, in prison, at each moment I reflected on the Joseph story, because he didn't sit in prison waiting to be released. He became basically second in charge to the warden. When he was a slave, he became he did all these things while he was in like this purgatory state where he didn't really know what it was, but he learned all these skills, learned all these traits that he then applied and literally saved Israel. So that idea was the seed in my head that I always knew that there was something else. There was something more. There was something that I was going towards. And I couldn't just sit there aimlessly waiting for it. I had to prepare my mind, my body, my spirit, everything for whatever was going to come.
I recognize that no matter what stage you were in, although I can relate, and I think a lot of guys can relate on, letting ourselves get in the way as far as decision-making goes. Mm-hmm. But one thing that I'm picking up on your story that is in common with a lot of other successful people that I've talked to is that everything you've done, it sounds like you've done with, a great effort and at least intent to be great at it. And that practice, I think, is one thing I'm picking up that, led you into it. So, every comeback story has a redemption to it. So I think we're getting into the redemption part of your story where you've gone homeless, maybe made some dumb decisions, had a recognition period, an awareness period, an awakening, and now you're the owner of CrossFit Morgantown.
Yep.
I'm sure you're saying, holy crap, can I really do this? And what happened after that?
I recently got asked, as a business owner, was there a time that I was afraid? What's the hardest part of it? I'll be honest with you. The hardest part of it was when I initially signed those papers, and that oh crap moment. Like, I own a business. I have no business skills. I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what that looks like. And I'll never forget. Yeah. One of our members, still a member to this day, near and dear to my heart. When she found out that I was one of the owners, that I was going through the process, I was going to be one of the owners, she firmly believed that the gym was going to close within 3 months. And I can't fault her. That's not a bad train of thought. I guess for me, the redemption story, and this goes back to something I said, no one is self-made. Even though I bought the business and I was on this island kind of by myself trying to figure it out, at no time in the story did I not have support from someone who cared about me and wanted to see me do well. So at each stage, there was someone to help me. There was someone to push me when I was down, when I was frustrated. There was someone there to pick me up and show me the way, and there's that old story, you know, someone's down in a hole, and, you know, people come down and sticks and ladders, and you can't get them. The only person that can get that person out is the person that decides to join that person in the hole and say, you know, let's do this together. So I had so much support with my friends. And I am so blessed and so fortunate that my friends aren't my friends like people think about. My friends are my family. I chose to stay in Morgantown for my family, not just it's truly for my family. They supported me. They did whatever they could to help me out. And it's tough to not get wrapped into the day-to-day of owning a business. Like, your membership's here, your membership's here, your membership's here. And looking at something from a finite versus an infinite mindset or perspective, where you're going to have fluctuation in the day-to-day. Maybe you tried something and it didn't work. Try this, never giving up. And you used the word, you know, kind of passion or energy. For me, it's purpose. When about 8 months into owning CrossFit Morgantown, I realized that all the hardships, everything that I had done up until that point in my life was for where I am right now. And it's not about passion. This is my purpose. How do Greg Glassman talks about the relentless pursuit of excellence. It's not about buying new rowers. It's not about that. What is going to impact our members the most? What is going to give them the best experience every single day? And make decisions based on that. So so many things have happened in the last 5 years since I was homeless, where I met my wife, started dating, we got engaged, we got married. Without her support, she's kind of the yin to my yang. She is really good at looking at financials, Excel, all that. So she runs that part of the business, which allows me to really focus on the performance side. Without her, there is no redemption story. So, and our paths could have crossed earlier in life. And I think it's God was waiting for me to figure things out and get to the place where he needed me to be to bring her into my life.
Your story obviously has affected you a lot. And how do you use your story to create the values for your gym?
Yeah. We had a meeting about 3 years ago to create, you know, the core values that we were going to base every decision on. And we sat down, we looked at the culture, we looked at all of our members, and we looked at kind of what was the culture that was already here, and then who am I as a person, and who are we as a staff. And my background, I'm about 49% Irish, and the clada, the heart with the hands and the crown, the heart stands for love, the crown stands for loyalty, and the hand stands for friendship. And we kind of thrown around that idea. And to me, it's a traditional Irish wedding ring. So to me, there is nothing more impactful than those three things. Now we looked at defining those, and for us, everyone has a story. You have now heard mine. And a lot of times we're embarrassed by our story. We don't want to share it. Like, we think we're going to be judged. But what we don't realize is we're not alone. Even though you feel like your story is unique to you, somebody has gone through something similar to it. Maybe they're going through it right now, or maybe they will go through it eventually. If you don't share your story, if you keep your story in, you're not strengthening the world around you. So our vision for friendship is we want to put you in an environment, a positive environment, so you feel safe to share your story with others, because it's going to make them stronger, and it's going to make us stronger as a community. The idea of love, crazy thought in 2019, we genuinely love everyone that comes through the door. Where there is no sacrifice, there is no love, and vice versa. You can't love someone without sacrificing. So for me as an owner, what that love looks like is sacrifice can look a lot of different ways for a lot of, but you need to be giving something up. Strike that. The idea of sacrifice is really interesting. My wife and I talk about it a lot. Even though I just use the word sacrifice, I don't believe in true sacrifice, because it's saying you're giving something up to get something else. But if this is really the thing you want, you're not giving something up. You're just going towards, you're saying that's not something I need. This is what I want. So
yeah, but sacrifice would be more so giving up the things that you want and not getting anything.
Sure. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so for me, I love every single one of our members, and owning the gym, doing this is what fulfills my life. So there's, and we talk about this, there's some friendship, love, loyalty as an owner, friendship, love, loyalty as a coach, friendship, love, loyalty as an athlete. They all look a little different, but they're all the same. And then the loyalty aspect is, we live in this world that if something doesn't work for a month, you try something else, you try something else, you try something else. We see that so much in the fitness industry that, I don't know, if you leave CrossFit Morgantown and you try something else, and then you send me an email and you're like, hey, look, I want to come back. Great. Like, super happy to have you. There's no drama about it. I don't care about you coming to our gym. I care about you as a person. And how can I better serve you? What can I do to increase that path, that journey for you?
When somebody visits your gym, how do you want to be remembered? When people interact with you, how do you want to be remembered?
I don't. I want everything but me to be remembered. I want the members. I want the feel. I want their experience. I want all of that to be what sticks in their mind.
That's deep, brother. And I know that's a loaded question, and that's a very selfless answer too. That's something that is very indicative of a real leader. And I think that something that's, even in the 60 minutes that I've talked with you, I've sensed a complete change in your point of view, going from self towards others. And it's ironically, if there's anything people get from the story, is that ironically, your life has gotten much better by focusing less on yourself. And I think that's very interesting.
No question. I am grateful for all the opportunities that have been presented to me. And my goal is to maximize them, not for myself, but how can I take an opportunity and increase the value or the quality of somebody else's life? And what I love is my wife's heart is in line with that. And her and I as a team, like, this is a quick, silly story. A couple years ago, my same best friend that I bought Crossfit Morgantown from, we had a conversation, and I told him that I believe that I could eat 26 donuts in 30 minutes. And he said, you absolutely could not. A friendly wager was made, and a date was set. 26 donuts, 2 baker's dozen, in 30 minutes, and all I could drink was espresso. And for me, that was it. Like, this is going to be a stupid, dumb thing. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
My wife said, how can we use this as a fundraiser? I was like, I have no idea. And so what happened was, over the course of, the week or two that we hyped this up with our members, this is unreal, and it is 100% her. We were able to fundraise close to $2,000. People bet, like, one of our members bet he would give me $25 for every donut that I could put in my mouth without swallowing. There were different time challenges and all this other stuff. We were able to raise, it was close to $2,000, and we donated it to a family to pay their electric bill in the winter in West Virginia. Wow. So, yeah, and that's not even where my mind was. My wife is such an incredible, I am so blessed to have her in my life that and that's why I say, like, it's not me. I want everything else to be remembered, because if you see me, I did something wrong.
Yeah. Where you have a lot going for you now, and sustainability is going to be the name of the game, I think, going forward, especially somebody who's a fitness professional and a father,
Mm-hmm.
you know, talking to another fitness professional and a father, a business owner and a father. I mean, you have a lot going on that's not related to yourself, and it's very easy, I'm sure, to lose focus on your own well-being at times, and, you know, will continue to be something. Someone with an issue. What are some boundaries, if any? And it's okay if you haven't gotten to this point. This is more, I like to ask all my guests this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Boundaries in our lives are some things that prevent us from, you know, it's something that could prevent you from getting back into old habits, or prevent you from getting into new bad habits, or ways to focus on yourself and keep your priorities in the right place. And boundaries are always set in the safety zone, not in the danger zone. You know, like when you drive on
Absolutely.
the road, the guardrails are right in the safety zone,
Mm-hmm.
not up near the edge. And so what are some, based on your past experiences and your, you know, your new role in your life, your newfound successes, what are some boundaries or some guardrails that you've set up in your life that prevent you from, or that keep you successful, that prevent you from losing your own way, if any?
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Like, I get off at 6:30 every single evening. I eat with my family at every point in time. Sundays are always off. There are some things that, like, my bedtime's at 9:30 at night. And those are things that I've specifically set up because I know myself. And if I let go of those things can start falling apart from there.
So this goes to a story that I heard, and my wife and I talk about it a lot. And I preach it to our members. When you're on an airplane and the flight attendant is giving you the spiel about, you know, if there's a loss of oxygen in the cabin, you know, what do you do? And you're always told to put the oxygen mask on yourself first and then put it on the person next to you. And in firefighting, that was really true. Like, if I wasn't fit, if I wasn't capable of doing my job, I put everyone else around me in danger, because I was going to be the one that went down. That now, instead of them just trying to put out a fire, now they're also trying to rescue me. Mm-hmm. So for me, that I don't know if it's clearly defined what the boundaries are, but I have a real strong awareness of the only way that CrossFit Morgantown, the only way that my family, the only way that I can keep doing what I'm doing is if I put the oxygen mask on myself first. We're told that that's something that's selfish. Like, you're caring for yourself first. You're trying to breathe before someone else. But in actuality, you can't do anything else that you're trying to do if you die.
Yeah.
So
if you're not well.
Yeah. If I'm struggling to put the oxygen mask on everyone else first, and then I pass out because I had a lack of oxygen, I'm hurting everyone else around me. So they're not clearly defined about bedtime. I wish they were, maybe. But one thing business-wise that my wife and I look at is she is a radio co-host. She does morning shows. And the way that we have worked out our schedule, and these are kind of deal breakers for us. And got some nice birds in the background.
Yeah.
She is on air from 5 to 10 a.m. I get to be home with my son and almost 2 sons. I don't coach at all in the morning. I am home with my sons until the first class I coach all day is the 11:30. So I come in at 11:30. I coach the 11:30. I do administrative stuff. I do whatever. And then I coach the 4 o'clock class. And then, much like you, I am on my way home sometime thereafter to eat dinner with my family. And my day's a little different, where my brain works best at night. So I do a lot of the business side of stuff when my wife and son go to bed. But boundaries are a tough word, because it's so tough for me to deal in the realm of absolutes. But there is the self-care, and then there's family self-care. Those are things that are really important to us. I love coaching. I got into this because I do love coaching. I have coached all 8 classes that we have. I've done that for a 6-month stretch. It wears me out to the point that I can't be good for anyone. So we have found this schedule that I would love to, be here more and do this, but I also know that my family needs me, and I want to pour into my wife. I want my sons to develop into the men that they're supposed to be. I want to share with them the stories of me being homeless to avoid them being homeless.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have a very powerful story, Jeff. And I know that, no matter how many times you tell it, it's got to be a little bit uncomfortable. I appreciate you laying it out there. And I think if anything that I've learned is that when I share my story, things that are real and raw, every time I've told somebody that those stories, they've told me to get out of their house and they don't want to see me again. I'm kidding. They tell me, they usually tell me too.
Yeah.
Or I know someone who went through something like that. And so I know you've given somebody hope by telling this story. That. And if anyone, and I highly encourage anyone who's listening to this that's touched by it to reach out to you, how do they contact you?
Yep. Easy. Jeff at CrossfitMorgantown.com.
Easy money. I appreciate it, brother. That's a hell of a story. I can't wait to hear the feedback on this one. And I will forward any replies I get to you. And hopefully we can have you back on the show again at some point and hear even more great stuff coming out of your place, because you definitely touch people on a bigger level than, obviously people are getting great results out of your gym, but you're also touching people at a bigger level, which actually impacts lives.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'd love to come back on. Yeah.
You bet. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Please reach out to Jeff if you were touched by this story, and I will be back on the air next week with a new guest. This has been the Inward Investing Podcast with Mike Ritter, and we hope to hear from you soon.